I was studying business in Cape Town in South Africa. So long as we have some fundamentals underlying them, it doesn't really matter.
I still sometimes try to find paths to repair things and I can't find them, not even from the manufacturers.
That's the only way, to be honest, that we don't end in a situation of ecological collapse.
I was just listening to you talking about COP27, and right now what they are more worried about are the short-term issues.
The chances are those buildings will become a cost for you and a liability rather than an asset. What kind of leadership we need that's different to before in order to take us from this space of breakdown to the breakthrough. I always take a big leap career-wise when I feel like I'm not learning enough.
Thank you, Dr. Wayne, for joining us today. One of my first questions for you was, what was your personal journey like into what we knew as CSR, I think only about a decade ago, if I may. And then, it's been a journey, isn't it? It started as a CSR, now it's known as sustainability. We are hearing the ESG word quite a lot. I'll come to COP27 in a bit as well and your views. But was it always a passion of yours? Did you always know you're going to enter in the field, or this is what I'd like to do? Or was it like a journey which ended up being what you're doing?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the podcast. Great pleasure to be with you. For me, I was studying business in Cape Town in South Africa just at the time that was the lead up to the original Rio Earth Summit of 1992. And I was involved in an economics and commerce students organization called ISEC. And they started organizing conferences around this theme. And I ended up going to a conference in Japan where we were from around the world, young people, putting our voice forward into this global conference, which was really the first time that the world agreed on taking action on sustainability. So ever since then, that's been my focus. And, it's always been about working with business as an agent for change. And, now I wear lots of different hats, but, I've got a Cambridge hat, I've got a Antwerp Management School hat and others, but always it's the interest in how business can accelerate this change and actually be part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
And how has it happened that it has gone from CSR to sustainability and ESG? What is your view of that journey, for a change of terminology, as it were, or is it real change in how people are perceiving as to what we want in the end?
I think it's actually two streams that have joined together. So, you had a strong environmental theme, which was emerging from the 1970s, roughly. You can go further back, of course, but 1970 was the first Earth Day. It was when Greenpeace was founded. 1972 was the UN Conference on Environment and Development in Stockholm. And then you had this other strand, which was really about social responsibility, and that you can track even further back to the sort of philanthropy movements of the late 1800s even, but then formalizing more and more. And so I think especially in developing countries, we saw a strong emphasis on the social issues and CSR, although strangely enough, also in places like United States, where that philanthropy tradition was very strong. But then you saw this environmental movement gathering pace over the decades. And, it was really in the 1990s that they came together as sustainability. And, I tried for a long time to evolve the concept of CSR through CSR International that I established. But for the most part, it stayed fairly limited. People really have treated it more like charity.
Correct me if I'm wrong, was it also related more to companies who did production? And it was more supply chain, making sure wherever you're producing it was sustainable? Or was this just my view coming from the retail industry?
Yeah, I think obviously there have been more issues in the supply chain that are social issues, and so CSR has tended to pick those up. Where we're at today is that if you really want to still use that umbrella term, you have to look to ISO 26000, which is quite a holistic view on CSR, on social responsibility. There are 7 core subjects covering everything from human rights to environment, organizational governance, and other things. But I did see a shift really to more people adopting sustainability as the way forward. Now, as you say, we see ESG rising up, and some people think it's the same as sustainability. It's not really, to be honest. It's the financial industry's way to interpret sustainability and actually more to measure sustainability. And I would say it's more limited than sustainability, but it's the latest fad, if you like. Yeah. So all of these things are, they're competing terms and can be a bit confusing, but so long as we have some fundamentals underlying them, it doesn't really matter. And I always say there are probably 4 underlying fundamentals. One is good governance. The second is, value creation, economic value creation. The third is societal engagement. And the fourth is environmental integrity. So long as we have these elements, it doesn't really matter what we call it.
That's quite interesting, because as long as your building blocks are there in place, you would in the end pivot towards in the right direction and then have minor correction. For me, the industry has changed so much in the last 10 years, certainly the property real estate industry, and the perceptions have changed about sustainability and how the business used to perceive it 10 years ago, as it were. Sorry, I'm talking in decade, and now. And also I wanted to pick up on COP27, which has just happened, because we were referring to how it started in the 90s and so on. Any views on what businesses should take out of COP27? Your views, positive, negatives?
First thing to say is, of course, we have the climate issue, which is one of the environmental issues. And the environmental issues are just some of the issues related to sustainability. So this is like a specific focus. And COP27 comes at a challenging time for the countries of the world, of course, with competing priorities, cost of living crisis, energy price hikes, war in Ukraine, and so on. So I think it's proving to be quite difficult to make much progress in Egypt this year. We haven't seen any big announcements. There have been some good changes. I mean, America is really on board, and good news with midterm elections as well. And we've seen moves in Australia. We've seen Egypt actually strengthening their commitment. So we've seen a few steps forward, but we've also seen a strong lobby from the oil and gas industry present, and a questioning of the 1.5 degrees maximum limit. So I think at the moment we're in a space where we have to keep 1.5 alive. We have to keep investing on innovation, a lot of which was signaled at COP26 in Glasgow. But it really is a time to sort of hold strong. I don't see it as a time of major progress or improvements, at least so far. It's not over yet as we're speaking, but it's important that still the major players, take their stand, don't give up on their commitments to net zero, keep the ambitions up for 2030. So that's on COP27. I have other thoughts on where the building industry is at as well, and what's exciting there right now.
Please, if you don't mind touching on it.
Well, I do think the building and the construction industry is on the cusp of a major change, really, where sustainability for a long time has been on the fringe, and we've heard for a long time about eco-efficiency in buildings and that kind of thing. But really now we start to see innovation coming in, and we have some very good standards that we can follow now, and not only the ones that most people are aware of, like BREEAM and LEED, but also certifications like the Well Building certification and the Living building challenge, these go much further, they're much more holistic, much more ambitious. And then we get other developments like the innovation in materials. If you look at an organization like Biomason, they're actually growing materials from bacteria and other living organisms. The important thing there, of course, is that the building industry has a huge carbon footprint because of the way that we make materials. I mean, when you make
one of the biggest,
or make concrete, this is highly energy intensive, whereas Biomason actually creates these materials at room temperature. They're lighter and more resilient than competing materials. So I think there's a revolution waiting to happen in terms of materials, but also in terms of these processes linked to the building industry, like creating concrete. So we see a big role there for green hydrogen and blue hydrogen. Basically, we need to come with a way to reach those temperatures that doesn't increase the climate catastrophe, and so there's big investments going into that, which I think is interesting. And then there's a lot of work going around the circular economy for buildings as well. In fact, where I'm calling you from today is Antwerp Management School. Our campus here, we've designed with circular economy principles. So we lease the lights, the furniture, and the audiovisual equipment. It's all on circular economy contracts. The flooring, if you look at a company like Interface, is quite a well-known case, or others like Desso in the Netherlands. These are trying to build in circularity also into materials for buildings.
So for our listeners, Wayne, what is a circular economy? So someone trying to, oh wow, that's a nice term. So as a asset manager or a real estate agent, what does that mean?
Yeah, it basically means a zero waste economy. Most of our economy is designed, in fact, more than 90% is designed as a take, make, waste economy, which we call
use
a
and
linear.
throw, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So all our materials, and that doesn't make sense on a finite planet. We have finite resources and we continue to grow and consumption increases. And so something will break down if we continue on that path. So we have to design everything to be in circular flows. And there are two major flows that we're concerned about. One is if they are biological materials, so that come from nature and that can safely go back to nature and biodegrade. Like timber, for example, is really rising as a material that can be extremely sustainable. It is, of course, renewable as well, but has a much lower carbon footprint. And then you get technical materials, which are those materials which are artificially manufactured, chemicals, plastics, these sorts of things that really need to go back into production. They can't go to landfill or to nature because they are harmful, they don't biodegrade. And so that's really the move, is how do we design everything to be fully circular? And that's the only way, to be honest, that we don't end in a situation of ecological collapse.
That's how I grew up in Mumbai, in India, and that's how I remember my childhood to be. So everything had a use, everything was repaired. There were shops, there are still shops where you can go and repair things, right from shoes to gadgets in the kitchen, or someone would come and repair your TV. And it was quite a shock to the system when I came to UK, and the way of living was different at the time. It was a lot more use and throw, and I still sometimes try to find parts to repair things and I can't find them, not even from the manufacturers. So anyway.
Exactly. It's about remembering what we used to do, what our parents, our grandparents used to do when resources were more scarce. And so, that's what you do. You repair, you reuse, you recycle. I must say now we start to get some policy incentives for this. So the EU has right to repair policies and take back schemes. And so we're moving in the right direction, but it needs to speed up. As I said, we're less than 10% circular globally. So a lot going to waste, and everything that goes to waste has a carbon footprint, has an ecological footprint, and a social footprint. So, everything we can do to close those loops will really help.
One of the things when we did the course as well with you was it's the short-term way of thinking, really, isn't it? And I don't know, I was just listening to you talking about COP27, and right now what they are more worried about are the short-term issues. I'm not undermining any of those issues by any chance, but it's looking into the next year or what is bothering me now, but also keeping an eye on the long term, which is what we are talking about here, really, isn't it? And then those are the things which we come across in the industry quite a lot as well when investment decisions are being made for property or real estate. Is the client thinking short term to get an investment, a return on investment as soon as possible, or is it some of the clients will always think in 100 years because they know that they're going to keep the property, whereas some of them will think in 5 years because they are adding value and moving on, kind of thing. And that has such a massive impact, really, isn't it? Is this what you see as well from your perspective?
Yes, and the course you're referring to for our listeners is the Cambridge Business Sustainability Management course that I'm head tutor on. And there is always this tension between short-term and long-term, but for those that are really strategic, they're looking at what the trends are and how the world is changing. And there's a very big risk of what we call stranded assets now. And this is especially true also in the building industry. If you have buildings that are no longer energy efficient, that are designed in ways that will simply be unacceptable in a few years' time, then the chances are those buildings will become a cost for you and a liability rather than an asset. So, there is a very high cost associated with being too short-term in your thinking. So we have to develop resilience to cope with the uncertainty in the world today, all of the disruption we see, but without letting go of how the world is changing. Now, I think industries and leaders get it. I think they're smart enough to see that the world is changing. It happens. I was just this morning meeting with the CEO of one of the big oil and gas companies in the world. And of course, they're not going far enough, fast enough, but it's definitely on their strategic agenda. I mean, they're aiming for net zero. They have a pathway. They're making major investments in how to get there. And so, that's what leadership is about, is really seeing how the world is changing and making sure you take investment decisions that mean you don't end up on the wrong side of history, because there will be winners and losers. And that really depends on how tuned in you are to how radically the world is changing. And it really is.
No, 100%. You have authored 40 books, Wayne, and the recent one is Thrive. Can you tell our listeners what Thrive is all about? And what do you want them to take away if they read Thrive? What was the mission behind this book?
Yes, there's actually 41 books, and the
41,
recent one is Thriving is the title. The subtitle is The Breakthrough Movement to Regenerate Nature, Society, and the Economy. I mean, this is really about how do we understand the complex global system we're part of in terms of 6 great transitions that we're having to go through, because what we see is breakdowns in nature, society, and the economy, major systemic breakdowns. And we see innovation in the form of breakthroughs to tackle these areas of challenge. And then these also manifest in market opportunities. And so this is what the book explores. Just to give you a sense of it, of the 6 transitions, it's how we go from degradation to restoration of ecosystems through the eco-services economy, how we go from depletion to renewal of natural resources through the circular economy, how we go from disparity to responsibility in our workplace and supply chains through the access economy, how we go from disease to revitalization through the well-being economy, and then how we use technology. So how we go from disconnection, the digital divide, to rewiring through a digital economy. And then the one that we're really coping with now, how we go from disruption to resilience through the risk economy. So these are the 6 transitions. And what the book is really trying to do is to make systems thinking practical. So we also derive 6 scientific principles that underlie living systems that allow them to thrive. And that becomes a kind of a test that companies especially can use as to whether their strategies are moving in the right direction or not. We also provide what I call integrated value management steps. So how do you actually do this in practice? In my work, we work with companies to implement thriving. For example, companies like Johnson & Johnson. And then there's a piece on leadership as well, what kind of leadership we need that's different to before in order to take us from this space of breakdown to breakthrough, and to give the message of hope in the end, because that's our most scarce resource right now. And yet I believe that we have many of the solutions, and we just need to scale them and share the best practices. And so we're in a period of transformation. This is what the book is about, how we even move beyond sustainability, by the way. Thriving is a net positive agenda. It's about regeneration, not only aiming to do less bad, but inherently to do good.
That's fantastic. I mean, one of the things we do explore on the podcast is leadership, because a lot of our listeners are on the cusp of taking that next step into leadership. What would you advise from leadership perspective from the book Thriving, which they can take away as a lesson?
Yeah, well, there are quite a few different angles. I mean, the one is that there are certain characteristics of leaders for thriving, or regenerative leaders. And so anything that you can do to develop that in yourself, but also in your leadership teams, really helps. And it's things like the ability to think in systems, so to be systemic, to be strategic, to have that long-term perspective, to be inclusive is another one, innovative, also to have courage, to have moral courage. These are the kinds of characteristics that we need more development of. Speaking the other day to the Port of Antwerp, Bruges, one of my chair partners, looking at their strategy, they said one of the things they really need right now are people that can deal with this disruption. So people that have resilience, that can deal with the massive uncertainty, the crises that come just one after another. So this is one of the key things. And then the other take on it is to say, from my work with leaders over the years, also through Cambridge, through the Institute for Sustainability Leadership, I see that there are basically 4 things that leaders do well in these changing times. The one is they're able to articulate blue skies. So this is about the vision, a compelling vision. Then they turn that into big goals. You know, we need the strategic ambition. It's no longer enough just to have, fairly unambitious targets. That doesn't inspire anyone anymore. And frankly, the problems are large and urgent. So big goals. And then they need to be able to take baby steps. They need to show that change is possible, that these solutions are actually out there, and that there's a pathway to this ambition. And finally, they need to identify burning platforms. And this is about the urgency for change, to find what is it that's compelling us to move right now. So these 4 elements, big blue skies, big goals, baby steps, and burning platforms, is another way to look at it. And then there's another lens that I bring based on my doctoral research, which was identifying what is it that people working in sustainability are inspired by, are motivated by, what keeps us going. And it turns out there are 4 different types of leaders in this space. And so knowing which type you are and those on your team as well can be quite helpful. These are expert types, facilitators, catalysts, and activists. And that's something I've written about quite a bit. And, we're not all the same, but but we're all trying to make a positive difference. So we need to complement one another.
Yeah, and I guess not everyone can be a facilitator, so you need a catalyst, or I guess it's just understanding that the team is made of different people, and I guess that's where the point of inclusion comes in, that it's diverse enough with a wide range of people who bring different experiences. That's very, very interesting for me. Is there another book coming as well, or for now? How do you choose topics, by the way? Is it... sorry, this is just me personally asking.
Yeah, no, it's whatever's compelling, a message that really needs to get out there. And so, yeah, there are a few other ideas that I'm working on. I really want to work more on the nature positive space. I think one of the crises that we're really making very little progress on, and in some ways is even more serious than climate change, is biodiversity loss. We've lost 2/3 of our populations of species just in 50 years. And it's something that business hasn't really engaged properly with yet. We're starting to see signs of it, but that needs more work. So something on nature positive, also a documentary film on that is something I'm working on. And then also just on the bigger question of change. How does change really happen in complex systems like global societies? I don't think it's well understood. And that's one of the reasons also that people get trapped in pessimism or despair, is because they don't see how complex systems change, because it's never linear. It's never a stepwise change. It's actually tipping point type change. And we see signs of that all around on many issues, positive tipping points where the accelerations are huge. And so just exploring that a little bit more, like how does change really happen?
That would be a very interesting book, because even in business, you think of this would be a good way of doing it, and you're wanting to integrate it within the teams, and the change is such a difficult concept for any human being. Even a breakfast change is a challenge for me sometimes. It's like, but I was thinking I'm going to eat this in the morning and I don't have this anymore. And just dealing with that as a stepwise, it will be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's understanding that in complex systems, actually, although there is a role for leadership, there is a lot of self-organization. And so we don't have to wait for the person who's leading the country or leading the company to make a certain strategic decision before change can happen. Actually, what living systems do is they organize themselves behind a purpose. And that's important, just aligning behind a purpose and a direction. Some research suggests that it only takes between 5 and 25% of an aligned minority in order to shift the behavior of a whole group. And so, the idea that we have to convince everyone is not true. We need this common purpose. And I think that's emerging, whether you use the Sustainable Development Goals, or if you're focused on climate, around net zero, or if it's on diversity and inclusion, there are areas where we really do see alignment, common direction and purpose, and therefore the system actually changes. And there's so much positive momentum. I think it's going to take people by surprise, a lot of the progress we're going to make. I often say the future is better than you think.
That's fantastic. Well, that's good to know. And you mentioned that as well. Hope is the one thing which everyone is looking out for right now, when everything you get from the media is this has gone bad, that is rocketing, or the interest rates and so on. So this is a positive message to talk about. But also, can I take a quick jump back to one of the personal points? So you were in Cape Town, and then you are based in UK now. How was the journey from Cape Town to UK? Was it work that brought you, or was it a personal goal? Because I moved countries, and that was one of the most challenging times for me personally. But how was the journey for you?
For me, I mean, I went to the UK to do my and just got involved with Cambridge University and ended up having that as a base, partly as well because my work was more and more global, and so it helps to be located in Europe. It's just more accessible. But a lot of my work is international and is in developing countries. So my work's taken me to 77 countries now, and most of those are developing countries. So everything I learned in South Africa, and I still get back, of course, I think gives me a balanced perspective that it's you can't just be taking a northern or a western, a rich country perspective on everything. You have to also have a developing and an emerging economy perspective, and that's important. And actually, a lot of the innovations I also see coming from developing countries, and that's exciting. And social entrepreneurship is alive and well in many of those emerging markets, and a lot of the clean tech solutions are also coming from there. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I guess one of the points was quite interesting is when you have the boundaries and you are very innovative, really, isn't it? When you have resources which are so constrained, you have to think of the best way of using those resources, and that's where innovation happens, as it were. So think inside the box.
Yes. And also just, I think in developing countries, the social elements are stronger, the community elements,
Yes.
you really, it's as much about ensuring people are coming out of poverty as it is about ensuring that we're not polluting or we're addressing climate change. And we need to bring those things together. They're not separate agendas. They're actually all part of the same sustainability ambition that we have, what it means to have a better life. And so that challenges us constantly, and so it should, where, this week, I think we passed 8 billion people on the planet. So, we have now a lot of people in the world who are aspiring to have a high quality of life, as they should. And we now need to demonstrate that that is possible within the limits of the planet. And, I think this idea of hope, I don't want to leave people with the idea that this is fantasy, right? This is, hope is not a passive thing. I like the quote of Rebecca Solnit, author of Hope in the Dark. She says, hope is not like a lottery ticket that you clutch and sit on the sofa, feeling fortunate. It's actually an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. So hope is something that empowers and motivates and energizes us, and it's based in action.
Not
and
in passive.
It's not passive, and it's based on the understanding of how much innovation is happening in the world. So I think this is the most exciting time to be alive, and especially to be working in sustainability, because we are changing the world for the better. And it's just a case of sharing now all of the good practices and scaling them as quickly as possible, so that we don't give our children and our grandchildren a world that is damaged and is worse for them. We want them to have the opportunities we've had as well.
No, 100%. If one of the saying which I really like is be the change you want to see, which probably is a similar one, which is more like take action rather than passively waiting for the change, for someone else to make it happen or complain that they are not changing enough, sort of a thing. If there was a business who are looking to be more sustainable, as it were, looking at the broader term, what would be their advice, your advice for them as next steps? Where should they start in a very broad spectrum of things you would advise them to take?
Yeah, well, maybe it's helpful just to say what are the 6 steps of integrated value management, because I think that is really the practical pathway. So without going into any detail, the first
for that they will have to take the book, right? But
exactly, there's more detail in the book, but it's firstly to really focus on the understanding the system you're part of. We call that the patterns step, really ensuring that you understand the trends that are happening in society and not in denial. The second is a stakeholder piece. So really listen to your stakeholders, maybe map their material issues and then figure out the partnerships that you need to get into in order to make progress on those issues. Then there's a step about ethics and values. So really being clear on whether you're living your values, how you're treating your people in your workplace, in your supply chain. And then there's a step on strategic goals. I think a lot of companies have strategic goals, but they can't tell you in 2 or 3 sentences what is the positive difference they really want to make in the world, and put a number, a target to that. And so ambitious strategic goals, this is about purpose. And I think that's probably the thing, if I had to say where to start, really clarify your purpose in this world. And then there's a step on reporting. So getting the metrics right. This is changing a lot right now. We have a new reporting standard from Europe. We have the World Economic Forum stakeholder capitalism metrics, lots of things going on. So get your metrics right. And the last one is innovation. So really think about what you need to change about your core products and services that make them part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And I think those are the basic steps. But maybe to start with, really get that purpose right. And it can't be about increasing sales. Nobody gets inspired by that, or market share. It has to be about what's the positive difference you're going to make in the world. And it has to be ambitious, and it has to be inspiring.
That's fantastic. And anyone looking for more details should really refer back to Thriving and get more details on that one as to how to drive that. But I will be definitely referring back to that one.
Thriving, just to make listeners aware. So there are a couple of ways you can come at that. Of course, the book is available as an audio book, as an ebook, and as a paper book. But there's also a Thriving podcast, Thriving the Breakthrough Movement. So I'm talking like we're talking. I'm talking to interesting people around the world every week, and getting their perspectives on how they're implementing different elements of thriving.
That's fantastic. They're definitely worth tuning in for our listeners. One last question, Wayne, from me before we say bye to the listeners comes personally for me, but it was, what is the biggest risk you have taken in your career, your personal life, which has shaped you and the next steps, as it were?
Yeah, I always take a big leap career-wise when I feel like I'm not learning enough anymore. I get into a situation, as I was after 6 years with KPMG, but also as I was actually at Cambridge University, where I feel like I'm starting to repeat the same examples. I'm starting to not make enough impact. And so at those points, I always jump ship, if you like. So the Cambridge University example, I mean, I left, I was research director for the Institute for Sustainability Leadership, and I left and I did a world tour, literally for a year, just going to, 4 different continents, 20 countries, just traveling constantly and just listening, finding out what's going on the ground in sustainability. And so, every now and then I do that, and I'm going to be doing it again in a few months. Towards the end of next year, I'll do another world tour, a Thriving world tour, where I'll be going all around the world and running workshops and just also learning, how are people tackling this agenda, where they are in their own context. So I think it's about taking that leap of faith sometimes and pushing ourselves constantly to keep learning. Even the books, I write books to learn, to consolidate my learning, I suppose. So never be afraid to take the leap of faith. Yep, that's it.
That's fantastic. Do you have when you go on these world tours, do you have a list of people you think are doing great things and you kind of plan to meet them? Or is it more ad hoc, would sound a really bad word, but it's a bit more organic, where you are in UK, for example, and then you hear about someone and you approach and then go. So how does that work? Sorry, it's a bit more detail, I suppose, but just so interesting that you travel around and yeah.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in the coalition of the willing. So I really put the invitation out, and as I will be doing now, and saying who's interested in hosting me and having that space to share knowledge, and depending on the interest and the feasibility. Of course, there always has to be some funding linked to it just to make it work. But so it's a pretty self-organizing process, as it should be with complex living systems. And so, indeed, if there are listeners who are interested in me visiting their country, their company, then do reach out. I want to also suggest I do this rather cheekily more and more now in my talks, but also in podcasts, and that's to end with some poetry. You may remember.
Yes, I was about to ask, but then I was like, do I? I'd love that. Thank you.
It's always hard for me to know what to choose, but I'm going to do one called A Place to Thrive, since we've been talking about thriving. And it's important to bring creativity into the space as well. I think it accesses different parts of our being. So this one is called A Place to Thrive. Is the world a better place because we lived and loved and learned? What will our children have to face because of what we built and burned? Are people better than before because we gave them dignity? What happened to the sick and poor while we were living strong and free? Is the world a fairer place because we fought for equal rights? Who lost for us to win our race? Or did we open up new heights? Is nature thriving, great and small, because we walked upon the earth? Did oceans rise and species fall with every breath we took since birth? Is the world a dying place because our enterprises grew? Did we destroy our living space, or did we seed the world anew? Each day we get to use our voice to raise the tide or let it ebb. Each day we face a simple choice to nurture life or fray its web. Let's let the world be better still for every moment we're alive, because we choose to use our will to make our earth a place to thrive.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. And such a lovely way to say thank you. And I'm sure the listeners will really, really enjoy listening to this podcast. Thank you so much, Dr. Wayne. And good luck. Good luck with organizing the tour as well. And yeah, let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for having me on, and thanks to the listeners. Lovely to be with you.